Okay, well, my name is Marc Victor. I'm a criminal defense lawyer for almost 19 years now. I have a law firm in Chandler, Arizona. I'm also running for U.S. Senate as a libertarian in Arizona, and my site for that is victorforsenate.com. Well, I've always been an activist for freedom as long as I can remember, and I've done many things for the cause of freedom. I've given many speeches, I've written articles, I've sponsored conferences like the one we're at right now, Libertopia. And so I got a call one day from a friend of mine, Ernie Hancock, who said, hey, there's a Republican running for U.S. Senate in Arizona who's pretending to be a freedom guy, and he's running around talking about liberty and freedom, and the guy is not really for liberty and freedom and individual rights and responsibility. So why don't you run for office just to keep him honest in terms of what freedom's about? And I said, I'm not interested. And he said, all you got to do is give a speech and maybe get in some debates and things like that. And I said, do I have to do anything else? And he said, no, we'll get you on the ticket and just do some debates and speeches and things like that. I said, okay, that's fine, on a whim, just like that. And that was a few months ago. And since then, I won the Libertarian primary and got into a debate, which is now on my website with the Republican and the Democrat and the moderator. And it was me against the three of them, and I think I got a few points in there for liberty and freedom and free markets and all the stuff we like to talk about. So I've become a candidate, and now I've been approached by Judge Gray, who's the vice president candidate for the Libertarians, and there's some talk about doing something maybe after this campaign. And so my thought is that I will do whatever is within my power to do to try to advance the cause of human freedom anywhere in the world. Well, I'm not someone who's really interested in the political system very much. I don't have, people are asking me questions, who do you think you're stealing votes from, and this and that, and about voting districts, and I don't know the answer, and I'm not interested in the answer. So I'm only interested in one thing, which is promoting freedom. So I have no interest, and I've said, in fact, my first interview was with the New Times in Phoenix, and I told them, they asked me, they said, how do you think your freedom message will be received by very conservative people in Arizona? And I said, I don't really care. I said, I'm going to be talking about freedom, and I'm in this to win hearts and minds, and I'm not kissing any babies, and I'm not kissing any butts, and I'm not watering down any positions to get one more vote. And if I convince people to support freedom and they do whatever they do, whether that's voting or something else, that's their business. And so I'm just using this as a means to promote freedom, which is what I'm interested in doing. And I'll say this too, which I don't say very often because all we talk about is freedom, freedom, freedom. But the day we achieve human freedom on this planet, where people are living in ways where they recognize that coercing other individuals is wrong. So the day that we have achieved freedom, I'll become just as ferocious an advocate for peace, because I think freedom is a prerequisite for peace, but peace is a higher goal than freedom. You follow what I'm saying? If you don't have freedom, you can't have peace, because you got people coercing everybody. But if you get freedom, that doesn't mean that you necessarily have peace. Peace is an additional component, I would say, to freedom. And so at the end of the day, where I'm really trying to go is in a direction where we promote human peace. That's an easy one. We got into the debate the other night, and my attitude was I won't be compromising on anything, and they were talking about earmarks, and the Democrat and the Republican were arguing about earmarks, and I said, look, earmarks are like I said, a drop of water in the ocean in comparison to the federal debt. I said we ought to be talking about what departments of the federal government will we cut. We should be cutting the government by 50% the first year and then move from there. That's a discussion about cutting spending. And I was, to me, I wasn't expecting a lot of positive reaction to that. And of course, I got none from the Republican or the Democrat or the moderator. But after the debate, I would think it's accurate to say that my Senate website got blown up with emails, and they were all positive. We haven't received one negative response from people who like the fact that I spoke the truth, that I'm not a politician, that we need to cut spending. And the problem with cutting spending is that politicians are afraid to disappoint people. They don't, if you cut $1 of spending somewhere in the world, there's somebody who's not getting $1 from the government, and they're upset, and they're not going to vote for that person who supported that. I don't care about that. I'm perfectly happy to say that you shouldn't get any dollars from government. To the extent you have dollars, you ought to earn them in the free marketplace. And so I don't worry about those things. And so I guess my advice to somebody who is pro-freedom and thinking about going into politics, don't be a compromiser. Take a principled position for freedom, because a compromised position gets us into a compromise end spot where we have some freedom and some coercion. And I mean, I'm not interested in that. I hope people aren't interested. They should be interested in a freedom position, and you can't get to freedom unless you take a position for freedom. Yeah, I would define a victory for me is really if one person on the planet heard something that I said, was not a libertarian. And when I say a libertarian, I'm talking in the small L sense of a libertarian, not the big L political party libertarian. Not that they're incompatible, because they're not. But if somebody who was not a libertarian heard something that I said and chose to become a small L libertarian, and now they're going out about their lives where they're starting to affect people and getting them to think about freedom, huge victory for me right there. If I get 2, it's a bonus. Well, I think in a general sense, what we know at this point in human evolution is that having a society where people are trying to live at the expense of their neighbors doesn't work very well, and it doesn't work perpetually like that. Because what happens is everybody is fighting to get the benefits of living at someone else's expense. And you know, Bastiat wrote a book about this called The Law, which is a real small, thin book, the kind of thing that I would never read, except if you do read it, you'll say, wow, this could have been written today. And he wasn't writing even about the United States. He talks about legalized plunder. And when we get to a point in society where people are getting benefits from the government that they perceive they can get by going to the government, asking for things, and living at the expense of their neighbor, we're in big trouble. And that's kind of where we are. And so I think we're at the point where we can say with good certainty that that notion, living at the expense of another, which we could also call socialism, it doesn't work. It's not sustainable. It's not compatible with human nature. And so we should abandon that, and we should really embrace capitalism. Capitalism works great. Capitalism is a fair system. And I'm not talking about a distorted capitalism where you have government and business together, where government is using the coercive mechanisms of government to accomplish things for business. I'm talking about a real free market where businesses get big because they do one thing well, which is satisfy their customers. That's a free market. That system raises standards of living for people anywhere it's been tried, and it's a great system. So we may be on the brink of a financial collapse, because it appears that the Republicans and the Democrats who got us into this situation have absolutely no solutions or answers. I'm not even sure they understand the question in terms of how to get us out. They can't even slow the rate of growth of government, let alone trim it back in any substantial way. And so I think, unfortunately, the odds are we're likely to suffer some kind of financial catastrophe. And hopefully at that point, we can sit back and assess what caused it, and we can reassess and say, hey, let's birth out of this a free world, a world where people are free to both define their happiness, because people may define what their happiness is differently, and to pursue their happiness in any way they see fit, so long as they don't interfere with another person's right to do exactly the same thing. That's the kind of world that I hope would arise out of the rubble of a failed system where people are trying to live at the expense of others. And if we can do that, then I think as humans we can sort of progress to a more productive, more efficient, more satisfying, happier way to live, more productive way on the planet, where people are pursuing their own interests. And I mean, people have to be free to define what makes them happy, because people are different and they have different wants, needs, desires, and that's just fine. Well, I mean, frankly, I wouldn't want just anybody trying to run for office. I want people who are going to promote freedom and peace running for office. And so if we don't need more people who are going to promote coercion and big government and things of that nature. If you're thinking about running, please don't. We've got too much of that already. That's why we're in the problems we're in. So people who are for freedom, I would encourage them to assess what their skill set is. And not everybody is cut out for public speaking or writing or running conferences or whatever. And so if your skill set is maybe just to talk to your neighbor about freedom, or just to live your life in a way consistent with the principles of human freedom and peace, do that. At least be an example. And so I would just encourage people to do whatever they can do. People of freedom, of peace, people who get the notion that adults get to live their lives however they want to, so long as they're not interfering with another person's right to do the same thing. Or to say it another way, voluntary transactions between consenting adults should be legal. Doesn't mean they're moral or wonderful or we have to like or agree, but they ought to at least be legal. And coercive transactions between anybody ought to be illegal and discouraged and dealt with accordingly. If we could just get that straight in our heads, people who have that straight in their heads, do whatever you can do to promote that in society. I would say that it's not a legal obligation. People don't have to do anything. But maybe it's a moral obligation. Maybe it's an ethics question. If you understand this, do you have some responsibility to help improve the planet while you're here?